Thank you for the correction. And so this is the committee's effort to fulfill Proposition 215 and 420, even though those two provisions in law don't address dispensaries of marijuana. So this is an acknowledgement of marijuana being used as a medicine. This is a way to provide for it in a safe and secure access for patients that need it of any age, of any disability or debility, and to provide that product to the patients, again, in a safe and secure way. So I'll refer to my colleague who is on the committee for any discussion, and we'll take it to the rest of the board from there.
No, Mr. Chairman, I think you summed it up very well. The committee spent just over a year, actually, on all the issues, recognizing that the whole marijuana issue in its totality has many different facets. The first one we brought forward was the plant limits per card, and then we brought forward the number of cards per parcel, and all of the issues that we've spent considerable time dealing with in the last several months, as far as this full board goes. And this is the last piece of our work, is the regulation or the handling of the dispensary issue. And there's two options before us. The one that lays out the regulations that we have the ability to set forth, and the other one is a complete ban of the dispensaries, which are, as you stated, they are illegal. They are not allowed. They're not provided for in Prop 215 or SB 420. And the federal government has made it very clear that those are not, those facilities are not legal. So what we have before us, the rest of the board here, are those two options to see which are the two that the board as a whole would like to adopt.
Thank you. To the board, discussion on the history and also what's before us as a proposed ordinance. Any discussion?
I'm a little bit confused here, because this 8C says it's just basically the action is to clear it from the Criminal Justice Committee.
Actually, it's to waive and introduce the ordinance and authorize the chairman to sign and then clear this from 2007 Criminal Justice Committee, clearing the board as a completed item.
So it's a combination of clearing the order. Okay.
Yes. Any additional questions?
All right now.
Okay. Supervisor Colfax.
I sat in the audience at the meeting at which this was put in place, and I heard the district attorney, the sheriff and then the district attorney comment to the fact that this ordinance was neither enforceable from the point of view of county law enforcement, although it was a wonderful document, I think is the way he put it, it's a great document, and not workable from the point of view of anyone who would be hoping to create such an operation. I left the meeting shortly thereafter, and there could have been revisions to what was said, but I would appreciate some clarification on this. And again, I did not take part in the discussion. I was merely there as an interested citizen and not as supervisor. But I'd be interested now in hearing from the committee as to the accuracy of my recollections and the implication of the comments made by both the district attorney and the sheriff.
Thank you, Supervisor Colfax. Yeah, those items were discussed. There were some revisions made to allow for grandfathering in of the 3 dispensaries at the time as the drafting of this ordinance took place. There was a particular party who has now since opened, while we were developing this ordinance, the third dispensary in the county here in the valley of Ukiah, and basically built his establishment around this ordinance. And so I have toured the facility. I've looked at the individual increments of the ordinance, and in my mind, not being a building official or whatever, I looked at it as fulfilling everything in the ordinance that we were looking for security, for zoning 1,000 feet away from various establishments. The applicant, who has now turned in a card to speak, I'm sure will speak to this question of yours in a fulfillment that it can be built and opened and run as the ordinance states. The ordinance further goes on to give a time frame for the other two dispensaries to meet the guidelines. I'm not sure, maybe county council could point out the section that they would be allowed and the length of time they'd be allowed to come forward and meet the guidelines. I don't happen to have that right off the top of my head. Mr. Lozak, I know you're busily looking for that section.
I am. It's section 9.30.130, exemptions, and what it does is exempt anyone who's been in existence prior to January 1st of 2008 are not required to comply with very specific provisions of this.
Okay. And there was discussions back and forth from both the sheriff and the DA and actually county council in the development of this, of whether or not we should actually adopt an ordinance such as this, because it is outside the purview of 215 and 420. I guess I could take the credit for this, of pushing this as a fulfillment, which I believe, of the oath that I took, of fulfilling the state laws of California, and the people have said, we want to have access to medical marijuana. This is my effort to provide that access, and I stand by that. I would much rather see this board adopt something like this. Maybe particular members have tweaking they'd like to see, but I would much rather see our board adopt this ordinance than adopt the banning ordinance. To me, that would push needy patients back out onto the street dealing with bad element of acquiring their medicine. And maybe this isn't perfect. Maybe this will eventually be revamped and tweaked a little bit. I particularly have a concern about the number of patients being served per day as being too low. So to me, that would need to be tweaked to reach a successful end to the implementation of this ordinance. Because if we're going to funnel medical marijuana patients to a dispensary to fulfill the law, we don't want to put a confine element in this ordinance to where we won't allow a successful operation of the dispensary. So I quite don't know how many patients would be intelligent, common sense, et cetera, et cetera. So we need to have a little discussion, at least from my part, on the number of patients allowed. But again, this is I think, a relatively straightforward effort to provide for the adherence to the law, provide for safe and secure access to patients, and move ahead with the general philosophy of Mendocino County as being, seeing the benefit of medical marijuana. So, Supervisor Koufax.
I'm looking at the point referenced by council, 930